Welcome to our Sunday service from Rosslyn Hill Chapel, a Unitarian spiritual community here in Hampstead, North London. Our sermon today will be preached by Rev Art Lester of Croydon Unitarians, and it was first preached a few weeks ago at the Paris Fellowship of Unitarian Universalists. We begin by lighting our chalice flame, the symbol of our liberal religious faith. May this flame be as the light of knowledge in our minds and the warmth of love in our hearts. We come together each Sunday with hearts full of joys and full of concerns, so we will take a time to pause now to reflect on those joys and concerns which we are holding in our hearts as we think of all those who are suffering in the world at the moment. We continue to pass the virtual collection plate, so if you would like to make a donation, you can use the donate button on the chapel's website or go to the Just Giving page. Our Children's Chapel sessions continue as separate videos which you can view on our YouTube channel. Now I have a story for all ages called The Cracked Pot, an adaptation from a traditional Hindu tale. Long ago there was a girl, and her task each day was to carry water from the well back to her home. She carried the water in 2 heavy clay pots, which were suspended by strings on a pole across her shoulders. Now one of the pots had a little crack in it, which meant that the water would trickle out, and there was never very much water in that pot by the time she got home. Now this pot was a bit embarrassed about the fact that he wasn't carrying much water, especially when he looked over at the perfect pot, who was so proud that he was carrying so much water. So one day the little cracked pot spoke up, and he said to the girl, "I'm so sorry, I try my best, but whatever I do, by the time we get home there's hardly any water in my pot. I'm not doing a very good job." And the girl said, "Oh, don't you worry. I tell you what, next time we go out, just have a look at the path that we follow along." And as the little pot looked down at the path, he could see some beautiful flowers growing there. Well, that made him feel even worse. He thought, "I can't carry water, I'm not as beautiful as those flowers, what can I do?" And so he said to the girl, "I saw the path and I saw all the beautiful flowers, and it didn't make me feel very good." And the girl said, "Oh, but don't you realise that you have been keeping those flowers alive? When I saw the trickle of water, I decided to plant some seeds along the side of the path. And with the water that you leak out of the crack in the side of your pot, the flowers will grow. And so now we have beautiful flowers that I can pick and make a nice display for our family table when we get home." And so, even though the pot had a little crack, he was still able to give to the world.
The world not to forget.
we're staying home. Love has never asked this of us before. We're staying home. This is our gift to humanity. Let us wish each other well. For those staying home alone, I offer you this blessing. May you grow a deeper understanding of your own worth. Dear one, leaven the aloneness with gentle care, for this too shall pass. May you be blessed with a peace and serenity. May you find the courage to reach out to hear another's voice and to remember others need you too. May you be well. For those staying together, I offer you this blessing. May you find moments of patience and grace in your relations. May you offer each other enough time apart, reassurance and space to cry, to safely rage, for this too shall pass. Then let peace come again into your home. May you see one another's whole self as a gift. May you be well. For those working from home, I offer you this blessing. May you remember to take breaks. May you find the means to relish your imperfection and the imperfection of others as evidence of our shared humanity. You are enough, even when there isn't enough. Make order in your days and then let it go. May you be well. For those staying home with children, I offer you this blessing. May you find humour and compassion in your days. There will be learning of a different kind, deeper no doubt, unexpected for sure. May there be patience and forgiveness again and again and again. For this too shall pass. May you all remember the deep love that brought your family into being. May there be peace and understanding in your home. May you be well. May we be well. May it be so. Let us pray a prayer for all. Spirit of life and love, God of our hearts, as we seek connection with someone, something beyond ourselves, we remain humbled by the awesome complexity of the universe, the miracle of creation, and the grace of the ultimate Spirit. In this time of prayer, let us give thanks for our community and our many gifts by naming our blessings quietly to ourselves in these moments of stillness. Recognizing our woes and faults, let us sit quietly with ourselves, those parts of ourselves which cause us discomfort, with a spirit of gentle understanding and forgiveness. Spirit of the Divine Self, we open up our hearts to listen to the wisdom of the still, small voice that may speak in these quiet moments. God of our hearts, let this small act of worship send a ripple of loving kindness from this place to our loved ones, our acquaintances, and the wider world. O God, may we become the embodiment of divine love. Blessed be, and Amen.
I've never done this before, never stared into the cold, unblinking eye of a camera and delivered a sermon. I'm used to looking at your upturned faces and feeling the pressure of wanting to reach each one of you. So let us pretend that we are doing just that. Let's put ourselves in a room that is not a physical room, but a virtual room. And let's sense the presence of those next to us, and you can look at the screen and see the other people that you miss, people who might be with you. What's the first thing to do? I suppose it would be to ask you a simple question, and I would say, how are you? Now, at any other time, you might say, well, I'm fine, thank you. But now, if you gave it some thought, you might have to acknowledge to me and to yourself that things are different. They're different in this way. We've become aware that we are vulnerable. Who remembers those old cartoons with the Roadrunner? You remember? Wile E. Coyote chasing that mad bird across deserts and up and down mountains and always getting outwitted by the bird. And in one episode, Wile E. is chasing along behind the Roadrunner, who suddenly darts to the left, and Wile E. goes off a cliff. But he's so intent on his errand that he doesn't notice that he's not standing on terra firma anymore, but in midair. But it's only when he looks down that he realizes where he is, and it's only then that he falls. Well, something like that has happened to us as well. It's happened to culture stars and prime ministers and tycoons and peasants. We thought our feet were on terra firma as well, but we found that we were in fact walking in thin air. The world that we had constructed for ourselves, comfortable for some, less so for others, has changed beyond all recognition. And here's why. We've become vulnerable. But as shocking as that is, we should remember that we've always been vulnerable. If you think about it for a moment, you realize we're born helpless, without fins or scales or claws. We have the longest period of helplessness of any species. And without total support, we die. And we sense that. When our nurturing parent leaves our side, even as newborn babies, we cry out in what is nothing less than existential terror. And then throughout the longest spell of maturing of any species, we gradually evolve coping mechanisms. We build little nests of relationships and create stories that give us comfort and security. We buy insurance policies. We invent antibiotics. We store up mementos and trophies on the mantelpiece and seal ourselves into a coherent worldview reinforced by religion. If we're lucky, we may traverse an entire lifetime without having to see that we are walking on air. Or perhaps, if we're even luckier, we might have the opportunity to see clearly what this pandemic is urging us to see, that really we have always been vulnerable. And yes, we've evolved wonderful ways of ignoring that fact. If it were possible, we would interpret those signs of our vulnerability as just occasional spells of bad luck, or something that happened to other people, and leave the safe, rational world we've decided to inhabit intact. One of my jobs as a minister is, in a sense, to collaborate in this idea, not out of design, but from my own desire, as you may feel also, to make things work out for the best. Not so long ago, when such things were still possible, I conducted a funeral for somebody I didn't know. It was an elderly woman, a friend of a friend of a friend. And as always, I had someone write a little biography for me so that I could make the occasion less impersonal. And as I read the words, I felt that I was, yes, learning about a quite ordinary life, yet finding it much more than ordinary. The peace was warm in my hands. It was shot through with love. It rained in buckets outside. The family wept. My own voice broke as I pressed the button for the final curtain. It's something I've done many, many times before. And as always, I wished I could find the words. I wished I could find some magic charm that would clear the air of the grief and anger and guilt that so often hangs around funeral services. After the service, the daughter of the dead woman grabbed my sleeve and said, "You know, you make me feel so much better about all this." But as always, I knew that there was really nothing you could say that would change things profoundly. But that maybe standing next to people in extreme circumstances was better than any great words you might find to utter. As the great Carl Jung said, if someone is in trouble, the best thing you can do for him is sit in the boat and help him keep it from rocking. And then later, on my way home, I remembered a story I love from the Sufi tradition. A little wave is rolling across the sea when a scary thought occurs to him, and he turns and he says to a big wave, "I think I see a beach up ahead. I'm scared. What's going to happen to me?" And the big wave answers, "That will always be how you feel until you remember that you really are the ocean." And that reminded me of a statement by Friedrich Nietzsche. He said that the world contains just three kinds of people. There are those who build sandcastles on the beach, unaware that the sea will dissolve them or claim them. There are those who, knowing that the life of a sandcastle is fleeting and insecure, decide not to even try. And a third type, those who, knowing that the sandcastle cannot possibly survive, do it anyway. Now, we all know people of each type. In fact, we might say we've all been all three types at various times in our lives. Because as a young person, when the world seems easy and fun and time is not an issue, we hatch great plans and attack the world with enthusiasm. Yes, we know intellectually that nothing is forever, but we can brandish these words like a magic charm. Not yet. Not yet. But then sometimes life affronts us. A pandemic ceases to be a sci-fi concept and becomes a hard reality. People who are just like us die. Our cherished hopes seem to eke away in the slow drip of days, and the comforting spell of the ordinary, that world of mortgages and vacations and pension funds, fall away. Then it may seem that the best thing to do is say, well, what's the use anyway? And turn away and march instead to the droning beat of the necessary and the next. But if we're lucky and blessed with the right kind of temperament, we can shrug off the dread of the inevitable and get stuck in again. We can get out the pail and the shovel and squat in the sand and begin to build all over again. Turrets and moats and a flag on top made out of an old ice cream wrapper. The best and bravest among us may stay even until sundown and watch as the waves reclaim the sand and the project is dissolved. That's when we have the opportunity to see that nothing really is destroyed except an idea, a small mirage that comes and goes. The sand remains, each grain rearranged in accordance with another, well, let us call it a grander plan. And the whole of the mystical literature of virtually all religious traditions has got the same simple truths to offer. And I'll put it in easy language. It goes like this: we are not who we think we are. The reality we forge for ourselves is a kind of temporary nest, like those made by migratory birds, because we have forgotten our true selves. We cling to the straws and sticks. We forage from the landscape around us. We strive to make the nest as strong and solid as possible. We reinforce it with things that seem to be permanent. We shore up our positions with institutions and relationships. We set about to weather the storms of confusion. The teacher Meher Baba put it this way, but I'll have to paraphrase. Humanity will always build illusory shelters on the shore of truth until wave after wave of reality drives them onward. Well, now, Art, does that mean that even a thing as shocking as this pandemic might possibly harbor benefits that we don't see, that we cannot see, as long as our shoreline shelters are intact? Is there some gift in the knowledge, that we're vulnerable? What would you say is the dominant emotion underlying people's states of mind right now? What motivates those bankers to leave New York City for the Hamptons in their droves? What turns the blessings of one's golden years into a blueprint of risk and withdrawal? And what makes those heroic workers in refugee camps present their grim faces to the TV cameras every night? Well, I think the answer can be expressed in one word, one four-letter word, and that word is fear. That fear that makes the baby scream when the mother leaves the room, the fear that drives us to build these sandcastles of security ringed in by relationships and guarded by opinions. To put it baldly, the fear of death. There are psychologists, there are philosophers who believe that the fear of death and knowledge of one's end is the prime motivating factor in all that we do. Along with our clinging to worldly things, we've evolved other ruses to prevent the worst. We create religions in which we can accumulate merit like vouchers that we can redeem for an unlikely extension of our earthly lives after we die. We imagine that we can stay the same forever, as if we could pick up the sandcastle and move it to a place where there is no tide. But even in these poor places of dogma, voices have often emerged that sing us a different sort of song. They say that before we took birth and after we've gone, we have always been. That while we live, our true existence is not arrested. It's just hidden. That the way back is through the only force that can overcome fear, And you know what that is. Another 4-letter word. Love. It is love that appears when the misty mountain sunrise or that transporting strain of music breaks through the walls of the ordinary. It is love that is both joy and longing mixed. And finally, it is love that helps you remember who you really are. We're never so vulnerable as when we love, when we dare to risk rejection and ignore the ultimate inevitability of bereavement and loss. And it may be that the obverse is true, that when we are aware of our vulnerability, our capacity to love is enhanced. And that may explain why we've seen so many touching examples of generosity of spirit during this time of trouble, why the health workers are able to get up in the morning and go to work in their overburdened wards, and the neighbors queue up to bring supplies to the elderly. It may just be that knowing directly how fleeting life can be energizes our capacity to care. Well, I'm going to let you in on a secret now. When people like me write sermons, what they say is meant not just for the listener, but for themselves. So, do I wake up at 5 a.m. and let the monsters of doubt and confusion, the ogres of small terrors overtake me? You bet I do. But as I get older, those demons seem to get weaker. Do I fear death? Of course I do. But then I fear leaping into cold water as well. But what heartens and sustains me is that I've got no deadline, you see. Something has spoken to me sometime during the night saying that whether or not I see through the curtain before my little wave hits the beach, that it really doesn't matter. If I'm able to see through all that sham reality I've so carefully constructed, then fine. But if not, in time, all that will be clear to me. And like the words of 1 Corinthians say, now I see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. You know, there's something else that the mystics say, something that never fails to bring me peace. So I'll share it with you. It's probably best expressed by Mother Julian of Norwich, who said, all is well. All shall be well. All manner of things shall be well. So I guess that means that whether we grasp the truth right now or not, everything's all right. Yes, really, nothing is broken. Everything is accounted for. So here's what I say. Lighten up, little wave. Everything is all right. Amen.